I'm Farah Duro, and you're listening to the PCOS Revolution podcast. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to the PCOS Revolution podcast. I am honored today to have with us Amy Medling, who's a certified health coach who specializes in working with women with PCOS. And she's also the founder of PCOS Diva. So I know a lot of you guys have looked at her blog, and she's developed a proven protocol of supplements, diet, and lifestyle programs that offers women tools to help gain control of their PCOS and regain their fertility, health, and happiness. She lives in beautiful Nashville, New Hampshire, with her husband and 3 children. So I just want to give a very warm welcome to Amy. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
So Amy, if you could just share with our listeners a little bit about what inspired you to start doing the work that you're doing with PCOS and a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, I think all of us women with PCOS sort of have a story, and my PCOS story really begins when I was a teenager, and I noticed hair popping up where you don't want it, and my hair was falling out and thinning, and I had a lot of acne, and then my periods were so irregular, and I suffered from bouts of anxiety and depression. And my mother was sort of, not sure what to do. She would take me to the dermatologist and the OBGYN, and nobody really had answers for what was going on. And I was given prescription for the pill and sort of sent on my way. And I really suffered with a lot of these PCOS symptoms through much of my young adult life. And it wasn't until I was age 31 that I was actually diagnosed with PCOS.
Wow. Okay.
I know. I went a long time searching for answers. And when I was trying to get pregnant for the second time, I suffered some secondary infertility. I was given a prescription for Clomid to get pregnant with my first son. And after one cycle, I was pregnant, but then had a hard time with the second son, and went on metformin as a way to manage my insulin resistance so that I could get pregnant. And I felt so horrible on metformin that I swore, once I got pregnant, I would never go touch the stuff again. And I wasn't, and I did get pregnant after I think my 4th or 5th round of Clomid before I was going to have to try, and some injectables before I was going to have to go, possibly down the IVF route. But I did not bounce back after that pregnancy. And I felt worse than ever. And I couldn't go back on the pill. My body just wasn't tolerating it anymore. And I didn't want to be on metformin. And I knew that there had to be another way to manage my PCOS besides sort of what my doctors were telling me. I had to take these pharmaceutical pills. And at that time, I was about 32, 33. And I just felt way too young to feel so old. And I was sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. And it was kind of in this moment where my husband walked through the door after a long day, and I was couldn't get off the couch. I was so exhausted. I had these two little guys, a baby and a toddler, and I just could not function, and be the wife and mother that I wanted to be. And that was kind of my breaking point. And after that, I started really looking for alternative ways to manage my PCOS. And it really brought me on this journey of many years, I would say about 5 years or so, where I did a lot of trial and error with food and supplements and lifestyle changes. And when I was 37 years old, after doctors told me that they would have to jump through hoops to get me pregnant when I was age 18, they told me that at a doctor's office, and then told that I wouldn't get pregnant without fertility treatments. I had this healthy little baby girl, and she was a real surprise, a beautiful surprise. And she's now 10. And I think it was after she was born and knowing that she had the possibility of inheriting my PCOS genetics, and which I did from my mother. My mother also has PCOS, we now know. That was really what fueled me forward, because I wanted her to realize that if she indeed had PCOS, it's not this negative thing that I once thought that it was, that I like to frame it as it's this opportunity to live life like a diva.
I love that philosophy. And I think that it gives us a little bit of an advantage only because we know exactly what's going to work for us throughout our lives. I feel like, and it's a good thing, especially when you have now so many more resources than 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Like your mom had no idea because they just didn't pick up on it then. So,
well, the interesting thing about my mom is she was diagnosed with Stein-Leventhal, which we know that is sort of what PCOS was called. It was identified by some doctors in earlier in the last century, and she actually underwent a wedge recession reduction surgery in order to get pregnant with me. So it kind of blows my mind that there was some awareness and there was kind of a treatment, although I think that treatment's a little dramatic. Not all of us have to have wedge recessions in order to get pregnant. But I think it's kind of neat that there was some awareness, even though she really didn't know what was going on.
Wow. Yeah, definitely. You hear very rarely about that anymore, but definitely that was one of the only treatment they really knew, I guess, back then, even though it doesn't really have to do with yes, there's a part of the ovaries that's involved, but it's systemic now that they know. So,
yeah, I think what happened was it suppressed the androgens for a time, that it kind of reduces those androgen levels, and it sort of allowed her to regain her cycles and be able to ovulate and get pregnant.
Awesome. Well, definitely we find there's a really strong genetic component. I actually have 4 generations of women with PCOS that we're treating. So it's not always, but I do see that there's some genetic link to it. So it's really important, like you said, to learn these techniques for your daughter too. And she might not have PCOS, but
right.
All these techniques are just really good for just living healthy and eating well and, all of that. So I think they could really help most women in general. So, so you have a new book that has come out, and it's called Healing PCOS. So could you tell me a little bit about what inspired you to write the book and really get it out there?
Sure. So I started PCOS Diva as a kind of a small little project. I had been home as a stay-at-home mom for many years, and I was doing all this research, as I mentioned a little while ago. My husband said, Amy, you really need an outlet. You love writing. You're learning all of these things and helping women. I was talking to women on the phone. My OBGYN would often give my name and number to her patients who she also suspected had PCOS, and they were having a hard time. And I would kind of share what I was learning. And he said, why don't you start a blog? And this is, back in the day when blogs, they were not what they were today. And it was a very simple WordPress blog. And I started it's going to be the 10-year anniversary this year. And I just started about what was working for me. And then people started following, and it kind of blew my mind at the time. And I've grown PCOS Diva over the past 10 years. So now I have, so many people that come and see the site. And over that time, I went back to school and I became a health coach, and I started working with women one-on-one, and all of the anecdotal information that I was gaining from my blog for what was working for women, and the experience that I had coaching women, and of course being a woman with PCOS, I wanted to share all of that information in a way that was really digestible for people. And I thought that a book would be the best way to do that. I had written an online program called the PCOS Diva Jumpstart Program, which I've had almost 6,000 women go through. So that was another sort of place where I was gaining insight and information as to what was working for women with PCOS. So I kind of put all of that research and information and anecdotal information into a lifestyle plan. And in my book, and Healing PCOS, it includes this 21-day lifestyle plan for reclaiming your health and life with PCOS. And, I wanted to make sure that women understood that there was really a connection with the way that you thought about yourself and your PCOS. And it's not just about what you eat or how you move your body, but the way that you think is really integral into healing your PCOS. And so I, wanted that information to get across loud and clear in my book.
I mean, definitely that's such a huge part of it. And it's not really talked about that much as far as the mindset that goes into it, because you can do a million diets and a million exercise programs, but they're not really going to work, right? If we don't address that. So that's important. And so I like so much that you do talk about that in your book, and you give different references for self-assessments too, which is really cool. So I took the highly sensitive test, and I blew the roof off that one. So I guess that's part of being, in the healing profession too. We have to be a little sensitive. So, I find that that's something that we look at when we test the adrenals with the Dutch test or that sort of thing in our office. We can see, at first I suspected, people are going to come up, with high cortisol and that sort of thing. But it's actually the opposite. A lot of times it's just very low. And it's just that production has just been burned out a lot of times. I think that's kind of that overstimulation constantly and burning the candle at both ends. And I think I really have the suspicion that it affects women with PCOS a little more. So what have you noticed in that? What observations have you had about that?
Yeah, and that's something that I still have. It's still a struggle for me, and I have to really work on it. This year has been kind of put me into sort of that fight or flight response, and I've been having a hard time getting into sort of rest and digest and like that relaxation mode. And I think a lot of women with PCOS experience that as well. Women with PCOS have higher rates of anxiety. And I think that it kind of has to do with sort of the way that we're possibly wired. But I think it's important to understand when you're in that fight or flight state, like, what does that feel like to you? I know for me, I get very short of breath. I get kind of panicky. Like, it's really important to be able to identify that you're in that mode, and then to have tools in your toolbox in order to kind of get yourself into a more relaxed state. And so things like breath work and deep breathing and essential oils are really helpful for me. I talk about it in my book, like a relaxing, I call it a detox bath, but with Epsom salt, because a lot of us with PCOS are low in magnesium, and magnesium is kind of that relaxation mineral. So Epsom salt baths are another part of my toolbox. Listening to classical music is another one that can kind of get your heart rate down, and just kind of put you in more of that relaxed mode. But all of these things that I'm talking about, they're all ways of taking self-care, and PCOS divas know that they have to really take tender, loving care of themselves. And that's, a big part of what I teach with my programs and in the book, that that self-care, it's non-negotiable, that you really have to make sure that you take good care of yourself.
Definitely. And sometimes it's harder to do than you think, and especially when you put out everybody else first sometimes. So it's one of those things where do you fit in the picture, Mm-hmm. So that's a really important thing. And I think that a lot of times people, they sort of gravitate towards the treatment that they need, and definitely having an outlet is so important. Like you talked about, yours is, with writing, and maybe others it's art or it's dance or it's some sort of movement. But I think just getting that energy out too a little bit helps so much, to find what makes you happy.
Absolutely. And I think that women with PCOS are really highly creative. And what I've found is those that are suffering the most with their symptoms have lost that touch with their creativity, and to do things like you were just mentioning, dancing and writing. And, it could be even as simple as coloring, one of those like those adult coloring books. It's just really healing on a deeper level.
I thought about that a year ago. I said, I really wanted to start podcasting because I always loved to write. And when I started podcasting, I'm like, this is something that it is a great outlet for me. And I hope more women do this because we just don't have enough voices out there. And that's why I just think it's so nice to encourage blogging or any kind of expression, because what you're going through now, a lot of other women are going through. And I think that just knowing that is so helpful, because a lot of times our patients are, women I talk to feel like they're alone. And this is, part of the beauty about living in the century we're living in now is that we can really reach out in so many different ways. So I really hope that if you guys are listening and you haven't found your outlet yet, give it a try, whatever it is that you enjoy. And, and wherever you reach, you just never know who that is. So I think that, since you worked with so many women with PCOS, can you share just an aha moment that you've had on maybe one of these greatest ideas you've had to date on how these techniques have helped with PCOS that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think that the aha about the creative outlet, that was a big one that I had. And I noticed, like with myself, once I started getting in touch with that inner creativity and I think really truly doing the work that I'm meant to do in this world, that's really where the healing began. I also think that so many women don't believe that they are enough. And it's at that core, like, limiting belief or false belief that so much of, I guess, the sickness occurs. And making that shift, we hear a lot about, loving ourselves where we are at, like, in this moment, or, it's all about, self-love. But a lot of women, they feel like, especially with PCOS, they feel like their bodies have betrayed them. They're like losing hair where they want it, growing hair where they don't. They can't lose weight. They can't get pregnant, and they feel so betrayed. And I think that sense of betrayal and self-doubt and self-hatred, it sort of fuels this whole cycle. And so learning how to break that cycle is so important. And I think if you can't get to the place right now of self-love, I think at least knowing that you are enough, right now in this moment, even though, you might have acne and you might have like a tire around the middle, and you might not look exactly how you would like to look, but you truly are enough. And believing that and moving from that frame of reference makes a huge difference.
Definitely, yes. And, a lot of times I joined a couple of Facebook groups for PCOS, and there's so much self-hatred, and I kind of like couldn't read it after a while. I said, oh, wow, this is not serving anyone. I mean, and yes, you do need to express it and all that, but I think that if you tell yourself things enough, it just becomes reality. And you just look at yourself and not a good light. So yeah, I think it's important to have people that lift you up around you as well. So, I think just paying attention to who you're listening to is important as well. So definitely. And if there's any way to surround yourself with people that are uplifting, there's definitely groups that are definitely positive and helpful, like groups that you have on your side. And also we do a group for our patients, and also women with PCOS on ours. But I think it's that is the main focus we try to keep, is more of an uplifting atmosphere for sure. So tell me, if you could tell me just one thing you wish every woman with PCOS in the world knew, what would that be?
Well, I think that I just would want every woman with PCOS to have hope, that there is hope to feel better. There's, hope that you can move beyond the pain and struggle of PCOS and live the life you were meant to live without it holding you back any longer. I think that sometimes when you go online, it can be really scary, and depends on like what group you end up belonging to. On Facebook, they can either have a very negative energy, like you were just talking about, or they can have a real positive and uplifting energy. And I think you got to just be you really have to manage what energy you bring to the relationships around you, and then realize that everybody else is bringing some type of either a negative or positive energy to your relationships with them. And you have to really protect yourself from all of those negative, I call them people who suck and sabotage from you. I think I write about that in the book. Mm-hmm. But I guess one word would be hope. That there is a lot of hope for healing, and just living, not living a less than life, but living a full and abundant life with PCOS.
Definitely. And that's so important. And being real with those around you too, as far as their expectations of you. Like, this is who I am. Okay. That's it. So if you could think of, we talked a lot about mindset, but as far as any lifestyle recommendations that you've seen really move the needle the most for women with PCOS, what would you say would be number one in your book?
Well, we hear about a lot of these different lifestyle recommendations, but they really, I think it's so true, is do not wake up in the morning and the first thing you do is lean over and pick up your phone and start looking through, all of the toxic social media and your inbox. And, it just starts the day off on such a negative, anxiety-filled note. And it also puts something and kind of someone else in control of your day. So I have a whole kind of routine that I recommend, in my book to start your day. And it doesn't include looking at your phone first thing.
Yes, mental hygiene.
Yeah, I think it's just the way that you start your day is just so critical, to the choices that you're going to make the rest of the day as well.
And would you share a little bit about your morning routine? What you like to do when you wake up, as far as our listeners?
Yeah. So, I'm one of those that really can get addicted to the snooze button and, keep hitting the snooze for an extra 9 minutes. Mm-hmm. So I have to really be conscious of, I call it, and I took it from Mel Robbins' book, The 5-Second Rule, and she talks about launching yourself out of bed in the morning.
Yes,
that really works for me. Like doing a reverse count. So instead of going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because you could just keep going on and on and on. You start with 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then just literally launch yourself out of bed. And I find that once my feet get to the floor and I go to the bathroom, brush my teeth or whatever, I don't really want to get back into bed. It's just that initial rocket launch out of bed. And, if I do that, it's, I've taken control of my day, and my day isn't taking control over me. And then I'll go downstairs, and I like to start my day with some warm water and lemon, and I'll read something kind of that inspires me. And it doesn't have to be anything that's too long or too deep. Usually it's some type of little daily inspiration, and then I'll kind of think about what are kind of the big things that I want to get done today. What's my, I call it kind of my big why. Why am I going to live, a healthy and make healthy choices today? And then what are the most important things that I need to get done? Usually it's just 1 or 2 things, because I find that if I have a big laundry list, it just gives me more anxiety. And then I'll, focus on gratitude, and I have a little gratitude journal that I'll jot a few gratitudes down, because I find that I'm definitely a glass half empty person, and that if I don't really focus on thinking about all the good in my life, that I will focus on all of the negative. And luckily my husband is a glass half full, and so he reminds me on a daily basis to focus on gratitude. And then then I'll sort of start my day at that point. And some days I can take a little more time, and other days that whole little sequence might only take like 5 minutes.
Yeah, definitely. But gratitude is powerful too. I think actually I got sent a Christmas gift. It was John Dumas. He has a couple of planners, and this one actually that I was using, it actually tells you to list everything you're grateful for every single day. And I thought, well, it's kind of repetitive because it seems like it's the same things, but actually it really gets into your subconscious and you're like, you just wake up in a better mood. I don't know. So I think it's something to be said for doing that every day or every night before you go to bed. So you wake up feeling like charged, so that's so important. And as you were talking about that, I was thinking about where you are in New Hampshire. And I would say, I don't blame you because it's probably really cold right now. I would stay in bed too.
Yeah, it's definitely harder when it's dark and cold, but the mornings are getting brighter. You can kind of start feeling some signs of spring coming. So yeah, it's definitely much easier when the weather's nice.
Yeah, beautiful there. And so if you could just tell me, as far as, I know that you like to listen to audiobooks and, so if you could just recommend a really good audiobook for our listeners or a book in general, besides your own, which we're definitely going to link to that for sure. And I'd encourage all of you to read it. It's just amazing. So if you could just tell our listeners something that's really motivated you that would help them.
Oh gosh, I mean, there's just so many. I was actually, I knew you were going to ask that question, so I'm looking like through my Audible account to see like what I've been reading lately. There's one book that it's probably kind of a funny book to recommend, but my son and I were I made him read it the other couple months ago, and we were talking about it, and he's a freshman in college, and I keep referring back to it, but it's called The War of Art, I gotta find I don't know what the tagline is, but it's The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. And it's all about overcoming resistance in order to sort of do the work that you're meant to do here in this world, that, we're constantly bombarded by resistance, and, even the resistance about hitting my snooze button and not getting up in the morning, that's resistance. It's like keeping me from living like my best life. So, overcoming, Steven Pressfield explains all of this, and it's really a powerful book. And I highly recommend that. And right now when I was talking about like a little devotional that just has like a quick read every day, I'm reading 100 Days to Brave by Annie Downs. And, I love Annie. She writes some really wonderful inspirational books, but I like this book especially because it's just like little short devotions, things to make you think. And it just makes me, I think a lot of us are held back by fear. And, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today if I didn't think that I was enough to be able to start that little blog, and every day, 10 years ago, and every day making a little step forward, that, thinking like, who am I to write a book? We all have something worthy to share, and to, we all have our gifts, and it's so important that we overcome resistance and be brave and share those gifts. So those are two that come to mind that I really recommend, everybody pick up.
Beautiful. I'm going to check those out for sure. And I think it's great that there's so many resources that you're listing that we're going to put in our show notes for our listeners. So definitely there's only one of you, right? So no matter what you create, it's different than anything that's ever been created. So I want to thank you for your work that you've done for Women with PCOS, and your blog and your book that you've definitely everyone should check out. So everyone have a wonderful week. Thank you so much, Amy, for being here. Take care, everybody.
And that's the end of this episode of the PCOS Revolution podcast. If you've enjoyed the show and want to help me spread the word about how women with PCOS and hormonal imbalances can lead happier, more healthier lives, please head over to iTunes and leave us a review. They really do make a difference. If you'd like to have a question answered on the show or would like to recommend a guest, please go to floridacompletewellness.com/podcast. If you're on social media, you can follow me at facebook.com/Florida Complete Wellness and twitter.com/Florida Complete, where I post a lot of interesting research, webinars, and articles on our blog about really getting to the root of hormonal imbalances like PCOS. So it's a great way to stay in touch with the latest developments. Thanks so much for listening, and see you soon.